Okay, so hello, welcome back to my channel. I have INFJs with me back again. So we previously made a video on each other's channels. I think it was like on the different functions that our own personality type has. We are both INFJs, and today we are going to be talking about quite a heavy and I would say like common topic that INFJs face, which is INFJs experiences with narcissists. And to be clear, the narcissist that we are referring to in this video is not like the common, pop culture narcissist. Is not referring to like people who are vain. It's actually referring to the narcissistic personality disorder. So later on in the video, we're going to give you the proper definition. So would you like to introduce your channel briefly?
So yeah, thank you, Tori, very much for having me again on your channel. As you mentioned before, you can find me on my own channel, INFJs. Basically, I talk about MBTI cognitive functions as well as Enneagram combinations because this is basically my main interest and I've been obsessing over it for the past decade or so. And I've been doing some different collaborations with other YouTubers, Tori included. As she mentioned earlier, we talked about NI and FE and then about TI and SE. And today we got together to discuss a little bit about the narcissistic personality disorder, what it really means, because a lot of, common understandings in our society think something else. Mm-hmm. And then also we will be trying to understand why INFJs and maybe some other similar personality types might struggle a little bit more with this and with dealing with such people.
Right. So, yes. So, okay. So before we get started, ways to reach me. So you can support me on Patreon and also on Ko-fi. And recently I actually got 2 cups of coffee on there, so thank you so much to the supporters of this channel. And you can also follow me at personality story. That is my Instagram account. So yeah, so on the topic of narcissistic personality disorder, I'm going to read the proper definition from clinical psychology. So in pop culture, you see narcissists being depicted as kind of charming, which they are actually. I mean, I guess the overt ones are, and having this really confident, well-dressed, very vain. But being narcissistic is different from having the disorder, which is what we are actually talking about today. So because when people use the term narcissistic loosely, it can actually lead to wrong diagnosis, because if you look at the personality, no offense, but some personalities just are larger than others, in terms of their they just I guess the way they show their confidence might be a little more in your face. So for example, ESTPs and ESFPs tend to be a little more what is that word, they tend to be a little more I don't want to say arrogant, but a little cocky in the way that they show their confidence, but it doesn't mean that they are having that disorder. So if you go by the pop culture definition, then you might accidentally, diagnose someone when that's literally just how they are. And they can still be a healthy ESTP or ESFP and not have the disorder. And you can, on the other hand, you can actually be a different personality type that is not typically very arrogant or seen that way in pop culture, but you can still have this narcissistic personality disorder. So it really depends on many other factors. So according to the definition from mayoclinic.org, so basically the signs and symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder include the following. So having an exaggerated sense of self-importance, having a sense of entitlement and requiring of constant excessive admiration, having the tendency to be preoccupied with fantasies of success, power, brilliance, believing that they're superior and that they can only associate with like special people. The tendency to monopolize conversations. This is really huge because, you know, people who are vain may not like to monopolize conversations. So this is like quite a different defining trait of NPD, I would say. Like, and also looking down on people whom they perceive as inferior, and the tendency to put people down and belittle people, and taking advantage of other people to get what they want. Having an inability or an unwillingness to recognize the needs and feelings of other people. So basically, if someone tell you, you know, they have a certain need, you tend to like disregard that completely, for people with NPD. And coming across as kind of boastful and pretentious, insisting of having the best of everything. And at the same time, they have trouble handling basically anything that may provoke their insecurities. They can become impatient or angry when people do not give them the special treatment. They can have significant interpersonal problems, react with rage, and try to belittle the other people to feel more superior. They can have problems regulating emotions, and feel very moody, and have like secret feelings of insecurity, shame, humiliation, vulnerability, and so on. So this is like a, you know, a disorder that basically has a lot of unhealthy, I guess like just like a lot of problems dealing with people in general. And so, you know, once again, just setting it apart from the pop culture idea, like it's not simply about feeling confident and liking to show off their clothes, because that's actually can be a normal part of a person's life. Whereas someone with NPD is going to be appearing superior and kind of putting other people down deliberately to make themselves feel more better about themselves. And so it actually comes from a feeling of insecurity, and not just a feeling of confidence, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It's definitely important to understand the difference between having, let's say, a very high level of confidence and ability to show off your positive traits, and the actual narcissistic personality disorder, which reflects on how someone uses all of these manipulation strategies to put other people down. And I think a very important thing to understand in general when it comes to NPD is the link that it has to BPD, borderline personality disorder. Because it's not like, you know, people with NPD and BPD are very isolated groups of people. They basically reflect like two scales, and every single human is placed somewhere on that scale. Let's say that the scale goes from 0% to 100%. Pretty much everyone is somewhere on that scale, on both narcissism and borderline personality disorder. The problem is that once you reach a threshold that was established by the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual, you become a clinical case of either NPD, BPD, or both.
Right.
And sometimes it's quite interesting to observe the interaction between these two, let's say, disorders, because quite similar to how the anxious attachment style and the avoidant attachment style get close to each other and attract each other like magnets, something similar happens with NPD and BPD. So just to clarify a little bit, BPD, borderline, refers to having a really intense emotionality and a tendency to get either very positively impacted by something emotionally or very negatively impacted emotionally. It has a tendency for codependency, anxiousness, a tendency to cling on to other people and then try to push them away. So the situation is quite complicated there as well. And it's interesting because people with higher borderline traits, I'm not saying that they have the disorder, they can just have high traits. Right. And this is more common for feeler types if we are to look at MBTI. they tend to like attract narcissists, and narcissists tend to be attracted by borderline or people with higher borderline traits. And that's because the narcissist is very like happy when the other person like constantly tells them how amazing they are, when they're given a lot of attention, a lot of appreciation, and that kind of makes them feel very, very good. And on the other hand, the borderline person is much more likely to be like curious to explore the other one, and curious to understand their mysterious nature, and kind of give them praise because they feel like, you know, there's someone who's very strong, and they kind of aspire to get closer to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So statistically speaking, I mean, I don't have the stats with me right now, so you can take it with a pinch of salt. But from my memory of the research has been done so far, I think the personality, the MBTI personality that is most prone to borderline personality disorder is actually the INFP. I mean, not surprising because they lead with introverted feeling. Not saying that every single INFP has borderline personality disorder. It just means that it is more likely for an INFP individual to have borderline personality disorder. But of course, you know, NF types in general can have borderline traits. Not saying you have the full-blown disorder, but like, you know, everyone is kind of on the spectrum anyway. So don't be you know, don't be like shocked if you feel like, okay, so certain traits apply to me because I'm hypersensitive, or I mean, not like hypersensitive, but because I'm like a sensitive individual, because that's like everyone kind of falls on the spectrum. So you would definitely have some narcissistic and some borderline traits, any personality type that you are. So for example, an ESTP might have some relevance with the narcissist traits, but it doesn't mean that they have the disorder. It just means, you know, they are a stronger personality. And so it's on the spectrum, and it's only when it goes too far that you would be given like a diagnosis, and you need to have like some kind of treatment. And from what I heard, though, borderline personality can be treated, but like narcissistic personality is really difficult to treat because of the inability to for them to recognize that they need to be treated. So it's not really because they cannot be treated, it's more like they don't want to go to therapy, for example.
Borderline is also quite difficult to treat. Like usually in extreme cases, psychologists use both medication and therapy, and it can really help the person with BPD, but they will still never like heal 100%. Like this is what most studies have shown. It can definitely improve significantly, but you cannot really heal it 100%. And I imagine something similar happens with NPD, and especially because people with NPD are less likely to admit that they're experiencing this, less likely to go to therapy, and therefore less likely to have the situation dealt with, as you mentioned earlier.
Because in my observation, NFs go to therapy a lot more, or at least they are more like open to therapy. Like I'm open to therapy, like my INFP friends are open to therapy. Like it's just that I mean currently I'm not going to any like, you know, because I actually want to if the costs are like lower because I feel like therapy in general can help people no matter whether you have a personality disorder or not. It's helpful, you know, in identifying like obstacles in your life and so on.
I agree with that.
You to learn to improve yourself. But yeah, so I think going along that line, we can kind of talk about how, you know, we have had personal experiences with people with NPD, or at least like people with really high levels of narcissism. I mean, I'm not like a person who can diagnose people, so, you know, not 100%, but I would say that in the few cases that I have experienced, they're pretty high levels. So I would, personally, I would say that they are probably close or the clinical level of narcissism. Would you like to share your experiences first?
Yeah, I have met people with high traits on the scale, definitely. And I find that sometimes I might feel a little bit drained after interacting with them for a longer period of time. And I think this is a problem on the INFJ sides as well, because in general, we tend to accommodate a little bit too much. And
Yes.
this is something that applies with other people too, not just with people who have high narcissism, but
Mhm.
because of the extroverted feeling function and the introversion as well, we have a tendency to kind of, not be assertive enough, not take
Yes.
enough like space in a conversation, in a dynamic, especially with people that we don't know very well. So this has happened to me as well. I would sometimes connect so deeply with some people that I would really just connect authentically to the person right in front of me, having a conversation with me or doing an activity with me or anything like that. And sure, some of those people had high narcissistic traits. And I didn't really care so much about it. I just went along with a connection, tried to like listen to them and understand them and so on. But at some point, I became aware that I needed to have placed some boundaries earlier on, because the lack of boundaries made me too vulnerable. It made me appear too giving and overbearing, and then those people might have maybe even unconsciously taken my energy away. And because of that, I then felt really stressed, anxious, tired, or anything along those lines. And I feel like a very important path of growth for INFJs and other similar types, could be ISFJs even, could be ENFJs even, is to really reflect on our own emotions and our own needs and stop accommodating so much just to make other people feel good or feel happy or not feel like, we are crossing boundaries with them. And we need to show us the respect that we show other people. I think that's really, really important. And this is especially true when we interact with people with high narcissism.
Yes. And I think that especially because we, as a personality type, we do not have extroverted thinking, and that's when I get really envious of people with extroverted thinking,
Yeah, me too.
because it's actually a very big difference. Like when I notice the people who use to some capacity extrovert thinking. So if you have not watched the video, you can like watch it. I did make a video about talking about INFJs and TE types in general, and I'll link it in the description below. It's basically because we actually are very, and it's not just normal weakness like not having the function. We are actually very vulnerable to thinking, because we don't have it in our function stack, and we don't tend to compared to other personality types like maybe ESFJ or even even ENFJ, like they have better grasp of TE than us, because for them, like, it's not their vulnerable spots. So they have some capacity to use it even though they don't value it, but we actually have very low capacity to use it. And so what that means is that for both us and ISFJ is another one, not assertive, we do very poorly. Like I notice we do pretty poorly in negotiations because of our lack of TE. I'm pretty bad at it. Like it's not that I cannot do it, but like I have to like be in a certain hate space. Like I have to like, I don't know. It's like a bit strange for me, but like
Yeah.
I have to like prepare and kind of be a bit more STP like when I do it. But it's not something that comes naturally to me, compared to many other personality types where they can just like immediately, you know. And so the problem with that is we do not assert ourselves in the moments, and we tend to delay it. And so our assertion is like very late. Like for
Yeah.
example, maybe we think immediately when it happens, like something's not right. Like our intuition will kick in, like our gut feeling. And usually our gut feeling is correct. But in the moment, it's very difficult for us to immediately react. And a lot of other personality types with like stronger assertiveness in general, Also, like, you know, people with strong TI, our TI is like tertiary function, so it's not that strong. We tend to kind of delay reaction, or we can like react in a way that is not assertive, like it doesn't look convincing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to say, like it's not convincing.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that affects our ability to set boundaries, because we actually have a very valid boundary, because our gut feeling is telling us that there's something wrong here. But because we are not good at being clear, that's another thing, because TE allows you to be very clear and concise and like straight to the point about it. We tend to kind of go a little round and about, and it can make us look very unconvincing. Sometimes, like, people are like, okay, you're setting a boundary, but you don't seem to be very convinced of it yourself.
Confident about it.
Yeah, so it's easier for them to kind of disregard it. Not saying that they themselves would value it either way, but it just makes it easier for people to disregard it. Yeah,
I definitely see that. And as you mentioned, INFJs and ISFJs with their TE trickster, so TE blind spot basically, have a really hard time accessing this function. And when they do, it's very unconscious, because our blind spot is not something that we can normally consciously access. It just is like a train that hits us and we never saw it coming. And when we access it, we tend to use it in a very destructive, negative way. So as you said, if you're very angry about something or very, very stressed, you might be pushed into that state. But instead of using it, you know, in a positive way, like someone who has it in their first 3-4 functions would do, maybe not 4, the first 3 functions would do, we will use it in a really damaging way, like manipulative or controlling, or we will just not use it at all and try so hard to be assertive and to set boundaries and to be clear. Like, I feel like INFJs, because when it comes to interaction styles, INFJs are a direct type. So INFJs and ENFJs are the only feelers who are direct. However, I would say that there is one exception. When we have this really, really sensitive topic, like when we need to complain about something or tell someone that they are overstepping our boundaries or something like that, we struggle a lot with being to the point. I remember at some point I was trying to be like assertive and to like set very clear boundaries with someone at a previous job, and I tried to like tell the person very clearly what was wrong, and then someone else, an ENTP who was also in the office, a good friend, she said, "Oh, you're so cute when you try to do that," and she didn't take me seriously at all because of how like unconvincing, exactly as you said, we sound very unconvincing. So getting back to the main point with the narcissists, they are less likely to take us seriously. Like, we will tell them, okay, stop here, or this is my boundary, but we will do it in a way that is rather unconvincing. And then the other person will be like, yeah, I don't think this person really is trying to set a boundary here. So they will continue pushing it. But of course, we suffer because of that, and we gain even more negative energy. And then at some point we explode, and we can do some really like negative behaviors, like, I don't know, binge eat or drink, or go into inferior SE and get into the grip of using that function in a really negative, destructive way, or be extremely aggressive in our communication, which doesn't really help either. It just makes things even more complicated. So it's like this cycle that you get stuck in, and it seems like you can't really get out of it, and it's really annoying and frustrating, at least for me.
Yeah, and also another thing is that people with high levels of narcissism, especially people with the disorder, they are very, very manipulative, and in the few cases that I've seen, it is surprising, like how, like surprising and not in a good way, like how they can really, really manipulate people. And so if you don't have a very firm way of communication, what is the problem is that what you're trying to say can be twisted in a way that makes it seem like you are the problem.
Yeah.
So like, for example, if you are trying to set a boundary and you do it in a way that is not firm enough, you don't go the full way, right? You kind of do the halfway, like you don't make a request. Like that's one thing I noticed. Like when I'm trying to set a boundary, I didn't even make a request. Like I told my I had a life coach for a while, and I told her like, oh, I tried to set a boundary yesterday, and she's like, did you make a request? Like what was the request? And I'm like, oh, I didn't make a request. I just said like, I don't think this is acceptable, but I didn't make the request on like what I will do, or like what's the consequence, like are you going to yeah, like that's just like, no, it's very like not solid if you don't make any requests.
Yeah.
Like, do you mean like next time when you do this, don't do this, or what are you going to do about it? Like it just feels like you're just saying it but you're not going to stick to it. So it's not convincing, and it's not firm.
Yeah, exactly.
And so people are not easily convinced, especially when it comes to people with high levels of narcissism. And that's another very high risk problem. So, I mean, I'm going to give an example of my friend because I think it's less personal. But anyway, so she had a boyfriend who was a narcissist. Like, I think that was a pretty serious case. She had to call the cops. So that was like pretty serious. I think that guy really had NPD, like the full-blown version, not just high levels. So he was very manipulative. So every time, so he didn't have a proper job, and he would like basically kind of get her to pay for him for his rent and stuff, and like and also like try to live at her place even though she has like roommates. And then he would kind of guilt trip her whenever she says no. He would be like, you're not even being a proper girlfriend. Like, what kind of a girlfriend are you? Like, you're not helping me out. And he actually kind of guilt tripped her into kind of spending the nights with him outside, like literally, I think it was like in a coffee shop or something, because he couldn't find a place to sleep, and her roommates didn't allow him to go there because obviously they're all girls. I mean, not appropriate. And he just made her feel like she was in the wrong for not allowing him to get a free place to stay. And when it was his responsibility, obviously, to get a free place to stay, to get like a place to stay. And he guilt tripped her like multiple times, like making her feel like she's wrong for like saying no, for like having her own preferences. Like it's really scary though. Like he would like kind of, even after they broke up, he would like kind of visit her even though she said no, like I don't want you to be here. And that's why she had to call like the police and stuff. But it's really scary. Like it's like, so that's the problem. Like when you don't know how to be firm and set boundaries, you can attract really scary situations, because people can make you feel bad for things that you didn't do wrong. Like obviously there are times where you did do something wrong, or you can self-reflect on that. But like I feel like there are certain times when we know that a line has been crossed. And when that happens, usually it's something pretty serious. And when that happens, and the person on the other side is a narcissist or someone close to that, and they are kind of it's like the conflict of two truths. Like they are able to infringe their truth on you because you don't stand firm in your own understanding of events. That's also like the TI thing, I guess, because TI is our own perspective and like how we understand situations. And they can really step in, like knowing that we are not that strong in our own version of events, and they can really step in and make us feel guilty for just saying no, or telling them that certain things are not appropriate. Even if we are actually doing it in a polite way, they can actually manage to make us feel bad, at least for a while, like wondering, did I say something wrong? Like, am I the person who is at fault here? when it's a very obvious situation that was out of
Yeah.
hand. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really important to make a habit of daily reflecting onto how you feel, even maybe multiple times a day. And when you notice that you feel something that is negative, try to understand why. It might be something unimportant, or it could be something really essential that you haven't given conscious attention to. And just try to solve the problem as early as possible. This really works for me. Practicing this constant reflection on how I feel multiple times a week, a day, whatever, to pick up on the negative things that I feel and make sure that I don't allow people who overstep my boundaries to keep overstepping them. It's not always perfect, but I think this is a good tip maybe for you guys also who are struggling with this as well.
Yeah, and sometimes, the thing is, another thing that I want to bring up is that narcissists are really good at, because they are very confident. So they seem to be very convinced of their own truth.
Yeah.
So when they present it to you, sometimes it really does mess with my own sense of judgment, to be honest. Obviously, there are times when I also have to self-reflect. I'm not saying I'm right all the time, because we all have our own, moments of, even for us, we can have our own moments of narcissism. Not saying we are narcissists, but like we can have our own moments of not taking other people's perspectives into account, or not taking other kind of versions, because sometimes we don't know why the other person react that way, and when they explain to us, and we are like, oh, I didn't know that I was reacting, I was unfair, and then you have to self-reflect on that. But the problem with people with NPD is that they come at you very confident. So like if you're not very confident and they come at you in that way, like even when what they're saying is like utterly ridiculous, sometimes it will make you question yourself if you're not confident.
Like gaslighting.
Yeah, it's scary. And sometimes when I think back, I'm like, wow, that is something that is completely ridiculous. Like it's like it makes no sense whatsoever. And yet, because they deliver it in such a confident way, like it kind of messed with me for a while there. I'm like, wow, like that's scary. It can literally be like something that happened and they deny that it happened, or something that happened and they kind of made it opposite. They made it opposite, and it's like, wow, they did that, and I kind of allowed myself to doubt my own judgment in the moments, because they presented themselves really confidently. And I think we can kind of go into certain manipulation tactics that narcissists use, that you can kind of help people to know when they are being manipulated. Would you like to give some examples that you encountered?
I would say that usually this gaslighting thing that you've mentioned is really the most obvious thing, because people with higher narcissistic traits are more likely to try to make you question yourself, even when it's really not the case. And I think that especially for INFJs, because of their NE nemesis function, when someone like pushes them and makes them like feel bad about themselves, they will go into that NE shadow function and kind of question themselves way too much and doubt themselves way too much. Because I feel like if you did this to an ISTP, for instance, with any blind spot, they're much less likely to do it. They're more likely to look at the facts, at the data, the experiences that they have, to see, okay, does this person have a point? If they don't, then, well, you can set us aside. Whereas INFJs can really question themselves a lot if someone else is like giving such feedback to them. And it will be a little bit more difficult to them, or to us sometimes, to kind of draw the distinction between what is reality and what we should really like worry about and change in our behavior because it's negative, okay? And what are the things that this person is just making up to make me feel bad about myself and increase their self-esteem.
And both can be true at the same time, like because the thing is, yeah, I feel like with ISTP example, they can kind of pick and choose. I mean, they can kind of select
Yeah.
for themselves. Like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like they can select it and not question themselves so much.
Mhm.
Like they're like, okay, so this makes sense. I'm gonna work on it. But the other one though, like that's on you.
That's
You know,
ridiculous. Yeah.
that's not my issue. Like
Yeah.
you're being ridiculous or whatever. And they can kind of really be very direct.
Mhm.
Like this is not what happened at all.
Mhm.
But like INFJs tend to kind of take everything and question themselves over it, and we almost like we sometimes wonder which ones are the ones that we should be
Yeah.
working on and which ones are the ones that are like not really true,
Mhm.
or just an opinion or some subjective thing that is like not really, you know, something to be worked on. It's more
Yeah.
like, okay, that's just their opinion of you that
Yeah.
is based on their own understanding and filters. Yeah, like I'm trying to get better at it because obviously there are certain things that, you know, are valid. Like, you know, when people do give you feedback, like, okay, yeah, maybe I didn't think of that way, because
Mhm.
we don't tend to observe ourselves. Like nobody does. Like we are not able to do that because we observe other people, but we can't see what's going on. Because we are not able to do that in our daily interactions. So everyone, like every personality type, kind of need feedback basically.
Mhm.
Otherwise,
Mhm.
they would continue doing the things they
Yeah.
do because they don't know that they're doing anything wrong or anything that is like unhealthy, I guess.
Mhm.
But sometimes that can also be a different. Some people have a different agenda, so they can kind of go into a different territory altogether.
Mhm.
Like while saying something valid, they can also say things that are not in fact valid, or things that are completely subjective, just your own judgment.
Mhm.
Things that can even be actually used against you to kind of feel better about themselves,
Yeah.
which is something that people with MPD often do.
Yeah.
So you know, there's a lot of stories. I mean, you can kind of find videos on people with narcissistic abuse victims. Basically, they get caught all sorts of names. They get put down regularly,
Mhm.
and that's just something that, you know, happens really often with people with MPD. They like to put people down
Yeah. Yeah.
and kind
Yeah.
of belittle them, like on the consistent basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't have a strong sense of self, you're gonna believe that like, oh, everything is wrong with me,
Exactly.
and not be able to kind of sift through and realize that, okay, certain things are objective, but certain things are not.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that consistent sense of self is extremely important, and the ability to think for yourself and take the feedback that you receive from other people through your own filter to kind of decide what applies and what doesn't, what is just an opinion, and what is not. And also, one tip could be just noticing if multiple people complain that you do something, then it's more likely that it's true because it affects multiple people. If everyone else in your life says, no, you're doing fine, but then the one person is obsessively criticizing you, it's much more likely that it's something that has to do with them and not with you. So I think at least this helps me when I think about the feedback from other people.
Right. And it also depends on the setting. So like I know that when it comes to people with MPD, there is this risk because they can kind of manipulate people around them
Yeah.
to believe what they believe. So one way is through the spread of rumors. So basically, they can make up something about you and tell other people,
Yeah.
and other people can believe it without like checking the facts.
Mhm.
Like yeah, because it's kind of like a smear campaign. Basically, they want to control the way that other people see you. So like if you happen to be like in that setting, and other people are kind of saying things about you that are not true,
Mhm.
like not factual, and it's because of someone who is spreading that about you, then like obviously like don't take it to heart
Yeah.
because it's not like objective. But
Yeah.
if you do hear certain things repeated in different settings, like with
Mhm.
people who are non-narcissistic, then I think that's something that you would have to work on for
Consider it.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the issue with the manipulation tactics. So you mentioned about gaslighting, right? Can you recall any like specific examples of gaslighting?
Yeah, like some things done to me and some things done to other people. Like for example, if I had a situation where I would be very upset at the person for doing something, and then I would want to like go and talk to them and tell them what the problem really is. And I would prepare a speech because I know that sometimes in heated moments, I feel very uncomfortable and I might forget what I wanted to say. So preparing beforehand and then going into the conversation and being manipulated to feel as though I'm not entitled to feel bad about that situation. And that's really ridiculous because everyone is entitled to have feelings, whether they're positive or negative. But like, of course, it's not the other person's responsibility that I'm upset, but I would like to communicate that, you know. And then me struggling to maintain, like what you said earlier about negotiations, struggling to maintain that ability to be like tough and cold-blooded in a negotiation is something also I think related to trickster TE. And difficulty with using this function. So then the narcissist, especially if the narcissist also has a well-developed TE or a better developed TE than us, they're much more likely to
INFJ, shout out.
Yeah.
Not saying they are all narcissists, obviously not, but like they can have a higher level of that because you know, but it depends on the health level of each individual. So,
but I feel like it depends on the combination between the type and also the mental disorders, because different kind of behaviors can come out as a result of that. So I don't know. Someone who has high narcissism and has a high TE preference, they're more likely to be better at kind of being domineering and taking charge of conversations and manipulating,
monopolizing conversations. Yeah. Oh yeah, like speaking of that, going a little off tangent but still relevant, like certain personality types are more prone to being like the overt narcissists.
Yeah.
So you know, the very pompous, like domineering types like ENTJ, ESTP, you know, those like ESTJ, that type of personality. Whereas other personality types, NFs included, can be the other type of narcissist, which is the covert narcissist.
Yeah.
That's also really scary. Like covert narcissist is when a telling sign is when they are always the victim. Like they are always the victim, and they have this like grief against the world. It's not just against one person. It's like literally against the world. Like, why am I always, you know, it's kind of like I hate the world. That sounds like a teenage me, but like, I didn't say I hate the world. That was too severe. But like, you know, it's like the angst, but it never goes away. And narcissists are kind of like kids. Like if you interact with a narcissist, they are very much like kids. So the covert narcissists, they are always the victim in every single interaction, and so it's really easy for them to say that it's like over every minor issue. Like you may say something that is like totally not aggressive, like you know, no vulgarities, like no belittling, and they can still say like, oh, this is about me. Like you said something against me, and then they're like, can you give me an example? And it's like, you know, because they're kind of acting out because they feel very insecure, and so they always have to feel like people are doing something to them, even when there's actually no aggression at all. So that's like the scary thing about covert narcissists, when they kind of always claim that they're the victim. And you actually see that a lot in society too, when people overly value the title of victimhood. Like that's also a very bad place to be. Like when they are always saying, you know, people are trying to do something against me. When sometimes it can totally be like not relevant to them, you know, in any way. yeah, so that's the other side. And I think NF types, unfortunately, I think feelers, tend to be more of a covert narcissist. So I did know one covert narcissist who is an ENFJ, and he actually cheated on his girlfriend multiple times. Cheating is really common with narcissists because they need the constant admiration. Yeah, cheating, and also like just things that are bordering on cheating as well, like flirting with multiple people even after they're married, yeah, things like that is really common with narcissism in general, covert or overt, because they need to apply.
Yeah, I think just in general, it's more likely that extroverts who are narcissistic are overt narcissists, and introverts are more covert narcissists. Not always, but it seems that there's some sort of correlation. And also think
there's a mix, right? Like ENFJ, they're kind of a mix.
Yeah, because of the feeling. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, talking about the unhealthy ENFJs, of course. I mean, INFJs can also be covert narcissists if that happens to be the case. INFPs can also, NF types can be covert narcissists. And I kind of forgot something that I wanted to say. Yeah, like yes, the problem is that I think with narcissism, the other side of narcissism is codependency, which is actually, if you look closely, like sometimes it seems like I don't want to make it sound like codependents are the same, obviously different, but there's a reason why, codependents and narcissists often meet each other. Not a coincidence, it's because we have some issues to work through.
Yeah.
So,
what I was saying earlier about borderline, because borderline is often associated with a tendency to like depending on others and to cling on too much to others. And that's why there's a connection and an attraction between the two poles. And the further apart the poles, the more likely that they will attract each other, I would say.
Right. And with codependency, some people are not like having borderline personality disorder, but they still have codependency issues. Yeah. So, codependency is basically like it's a insecure attachment style, meaning that you just don't feel very secure when it comes to intimacy, and you often feel like you are not good enough, or you're going to be replaced by someone, like just general anxious attachment problems. And the tendency to people please. So INFJs definitely can have codependency issues, and so as a result of that, INFJs do tend to, I guess, mix narcissists, because both narcissists and codependents actually have a need. And for narcissists, they need people to kind of admire them, like to always like make them feel like they are the best. And in the case of covert narcissists, they need people to pity them, like they are like special because they're the biggest victim of all. Not just the victim, but they have like special treatment because they are like the most important victim. And for the overt narcissists, they need the most attention, like look at my achievements, they need people to constantly feed that ego, to show them that they're like the top. And so with codependence, they have a need too. And codependence need is to feel I think codependence need is to feel like they are loved and that they are cared for. And narcissists can be pretty good at doing the love bombing thing. I mean, if you're dating one,
especially at the beginning.
So that's why, again, in a dating sense, it doesn't have to be a dating sense, but like it does also have that problem, because codependence people can fall for that a lot more than other types.
Definitely.
do you have any experience with dating them, or it's just more like other situations?
No, not really. And I'm happy for that. But I've usually encountered such dynamics in the workplace or with friends, or I don't know, just people that I had to do something with in different contexts, like hobbies or other activities that I took part in, but not in the dating world, fortunately.
Yeah, I mean, for me also, mostly not in the dating world. I mean,
Mm,
I've encountered once and it was really scary.
okay.
But that was a very short term dating. So
Okay.
fortunately, it didn't advance into a relationship because there were too many strange
Too
like
many
dynamics.
red flags. Yeah.
Yeah, like just like constant basically that person always has a lot of girls like commenting
Mhm.
on his account, and the thing is narcissists often claim to be a certain type of person and their actions are otherwise, you know.
Yeah.
They can claim like, oh, I'm so loyal, like I'm really kind, I'm really like one of the kindest people. I don't know why they like to say that. They're like, I'm very kind hearted, I'm like they can brag about their compassion or loyalty, but
Mhm.
generally I think people who tell you that they are that way, like it's a bit fishy because usually people just let the actions speak for themselves. So
Yeah. True. That's true.
yeah, so I think with the codependence and narcissism is more like it's like a way to kind of teach us about ourselves.
Mhm.
I think that's how I see it, the dynamic.
I also
It's a
think
way
that.
to show us like what we are doing that is um like something that we have to realize about ourselves. That's
That
how this dynamic is supposed to go. I mean, I don't know how the narcissists make of this dynamic, like whether it teaches them something, because they may not be aware
Mhm.
that they have issues. But for
Yeah.
the codependent side, at least, we can kind of realize what this dynamic is trying to teach us. Like
Mhm.
obviously trying to teach us that we have to find a way to fill our own cup. Um, and so like that would kind of lessen the frequency that we meet this type of people. Yeah.
I would say that's one thing, and the other thing is to teach us to set healthier boundaries. Because sometimes it's not about codependency; it might just be in a work setting, and just knowing that enough is enough, and being able to verbalize that rather than just going with the flow and hoping that at some point something miraculous will save us from the dynamic. So yeah, these two lessons I think
Yeah.
are really important.
Yeah, no one's coming to save you. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, and I think self-sufficiency too.
Yeah.
And like the thing is when someone doesn't respect your boundary, like what are you going to do about it? That's like a serious question because a lot of times people with MPD are not going to respond well to boundaries. They may actually respond even worse like after you set the boundaries. So
Mhm.
you have to know how to deal with that too, because not everyone is going to be like a healthy person who is like, oh, thank you for voicing that out, like I'm gonna take notes. And most
Exactly.
of the time the people who are stepping on your boundaries are not gonna respond well, and you have to understand that and find out a way to deal with the consequence. Like you
Mhm.
have to find um a way to kind of make it work for you, like
Mhm.
to set your own consequence.
Yeah.
So that's also another thing. Like I don't know about you, like how do you, so if someone, let's say if someone continuously steps on your boundaries and maybe also claim that, oh, it's not a serious issue, like you shouldn't be feeling this way, like you're
Mhm.
overreacting, um like things like that, like how would you deal with that if someone doesn't respect your boundaries?
Yeah, I've been struggling with this many times in the past. And I usually have a hard time, as I said earlier, saying very clearly that these are my boundaries. But I've practiced it and I've tried to do it more often and more often, because it's basically like a muscle that you're training. And the more you do it,
Right.
the better you become at it. And I try to repeat that thing. And sometimes if it doesn't work, I just kind of distance myself from that person. Not completely, but at least a little bit. So I gain a breath of fresh air and have the ability to like just be with myself and fulfill my own needs, rather than constantly feeling bad that I have to set boundaries and say no to the other person, because that also makes me feel a little bit anxious sometimes.
Yeah, and I think there's like this I guess response that I saw on videos. The suggestion is that if the person like does not respect your boundaries at all, and like maybe claim that, you know, common responses are like, oh, you are being like hypersensitive, like, you know, I didn't do anything wrong, like you are the one who is like the problem, you know. And if people basically they don't respect your boundary and they don't want to make any form of adjustment, but you know that that is something seriously wrong, like not just about like, you know, a small issue. It's not just about you being upset over a petty matter, but it's like an actual issue there. Then you have to like set the consequence yourself. So basically, like, you know, you can choose to walk away, or just like be like, okay, I'm just not going to be there.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like you literally have to do that, because if that person is not going to respect your boundaries, like you have to risk offending them that way. And that's not something that INFJs like to do. Like I don't like doing that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because they can kind of guilt trip you too. Like if you try to do that, and they can say like, oh, like why are you walking away? Like you're being rude here, you know, by choosing not to be here, or by choosing to have your own, I guess, doing your own thing or having distance. But you have to really stand your ground when that happens, and that is not an easy thing. But you have to kind of learn that, I guess.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So, yep, I think this is enough discussion for on this topic. And remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and also feel free to comment your own experiences with people that you maybe suspect has the NPD or falls like somewhere high on the spectrum. And yeah, and maybe share your own tips when it comes to dealing with this type of situations. So once again, thank you for joining the video, and
Thank you very much for having me.
on your channel next time. Yeah.
Sure, that would be really nice. It was a really nice discussion, and as you said, I'm curious about your experiences with people with NPD and what you personally have like noticed and come up with as conclusions based on how you feel about it. So thank you very much, guys, and thank you, Tori.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.